Hello, my name's Tony and I'm an Agile and Scrum trainer for QA. Welcome to the pre-course work for the Scrum Master and Product Owner 2-day training course. So the first question we're going to start off with is, what is Agile? Many organisations, such as your own, have started to trigger projects, programs, transformational work, change work. And it's based upon a lot of people's chief executives or senior leaders are coming out and saying we must be more agile. We must be more agile, get things to market quicker. And a lot of organisations are looking at this and trying to understand what agile actually is. So we're going to break it into three categories. So we've got agile, as you can see here, with an uppercase A. We've got agile with a lowercase a. And then we've got agility. What most people understand as agile is the umbrella term which covers all of the agile frameworks. So this is the agile landscape. You can see it's version 3 and there are many different frameworks in there. If we look in the middle here, we can see Scrum. If you look at down here, the yellow, Dynamic Systems Development Method. There are many different frameworks and practices within the world of Scrum. What most organisations are actually after is changing the organisation and embracing an agile mindset. And an agile mindset works into sort of like collaborative working practices, communicating continuously, communicating clearly, having transparency in place, evolving solutions together, so business people and developers working together, so iteratively developing, going through feedback loops, so if we're going to fail, we'll fail fast. So this is part of what the agile mindset is, and most organizations are attempting to adopt an agile mindset much more than they are agile frameworks, because what they hope to achieve is business agility. And business agility is the ability of your organization to be able to move and adapt with market conditions. So, where does Agile come from? Agile is not a new thing. Agile ways of working, for me, the grandfather of Agile sits within the lean mindset. So many of you work or maybe worked around manufacturing. So we understand things like continuous process improvement, Kaizen, good change. We understand about eliminating waste within business. We understand about over processing the features. If we want to innovate, then go to the place of work, Gemba. So most people understand this. The feedback loops that we use within continuous process improvement, things like plan, do, check, act cycles, plan, do, study, act cycles, things like POOGI, process of ongoing improvement. These feedback loops come from the scientific method. So we can see on the slide, in the scientific method, we ask questions, we do some background research, we construct a hypothesis, we then test with an experiment. And based upon the experiment, we analyse the results and we draw a conclusion. If the hypothesis is true, we report results, so we're transparent. If the hypothesis is false or partially true, we still report results, so we're still transparent. And then we go through this loop and we think and we try and again. So within the world of Agile, we would say, do we persevere? So do we continue on in this direction, or do we pivot? Do we change direction? And this is based upon these feedback loops that come from the scientific method. As you can see on the left hand side of this slide, I've identified somebody where the scientific method is attributed to them, and the earliest I can find really is a gentleman called Robert Grosseteste, which is 1175 to 1253. And the work of these people is based upon the Socratic method. And Socrates was very clever, but I'm sure he was pre-software development. And this is where one of the myths of Agile comes from. They identify that Agile is only suitable for software development, or it would only be used within the world of IT. Organizations are trying to embrace a joy of business agility. Not just agility within IT, but to be able to sort of change processes and working practices and change the mindset of the entire organization. And for that to work, we need to adopt an agile mindset, not just the frameworks. Without adopting an agile mindset, the frameworks can become a bit of a waste. So, why agile? Why all of this focus on agile? For a lot of people, agile has sort of come about, and it seemed to be, I've had delegates on training courses say, well, agile is trendy. Let's look at this. If we look at the slide, we can see that there is an as-is state. So down here we've got the as-is state, and this is where your organisation currently is. And this is the future state. This is where they're trying to get to. Many years ago, probably within your organisation as well, organisations were able to move from the as-is to the future state in quite a stable manner. Okay? So we would put in place projects or programs, and this was in a world before we were tech supported. Then after a while we became tech supported, so organisations used to embrace it, or started to adopt technology. So paper-based systems started to be used within spreadsheets, and we started to develop sort of technological solutions for it. Our society then moved into a tech-enabled society. So think about how you deal with banking nowadays. Think about the amount of apps we've got to things. Think about the amount of maps that you actually read if you're not orienteering. You know, these are just apps which are now sit on a mobile phone. So the world has changed, and the difficulty is, because the world has changed, I as an individual can take on the might of a large organisation. All I need to do is have good social media presence, a good web presence, and I can look as big as an organisation. Now if you find me, you can come in and you can compete with me, and you could probably sort of like destroy my organisation. But I can come into your business and I can find out what you do poorly. So the difference between your as is and your future state is called your delta. And all I have to do is find out what you're not doing that well, maybe with your customers or within your supply chain. And I attack the delta and I disrupt that part of the marketplace. So a disruptor in business, you'll notice it says in business, a disruptive innovation is an innovation that creates a new market and value network and eventually disrupts an existing market and value network, displacing established market-leading firms, products and alliances. One of the largest disruptors that people understand is Amazon. So Amazon got a foothold within the publishing marketplace and now dominates it. So disruptors will come into your marketplace, and if you don't have the ability to be able to move and change with market conditions, you can't compete. If they get a foothold within that marketplace, the other thing a lot of businesses do is they will then go up and buy that product or buy that business, normally at a premium. But essentially what they're doing is they're buying back what would traditionally be their own market share. So this is why organisations are now, even very large established organisations, are looking at new ways of working. Because with a tech-enabled society, it's much easier for disruptors to be able to enter your marketplace. When we look at traditional ways of working, many organisations talk about taking a waterfall approach. Now, to be fair, waterfall was a software development methodology. Within non-software markets, we still use something called phased program planning, and it works in exactly the same way. So if we look at the waterfall approach, we go in, we gather requirements, we do an analysis of the requirements, we then do some design, coding, testing, and then we go operational. Well, to move this away from software, let's say coding is just doing some work. Okay. Waterfall is not a bad way of working. Look at when this was developed as a method. It was developed in the 1970s. So at that point we were only tech supported, so the world was moving at a pace where waterfall worked quite well. Also, one of the other difficulties with waterfall ways of working nowadays is it relies very heavily on people being able to specify exactly what it is they want up front. So you'll notice where requirements sit. And this proves to be quite difficult because a lot of the time we don't actually understand what it is we want. So we then spend a great deal of time up front forcing businesses to specify exactly what it is they want when they won't understand what it is they want until they see it. If you also look at the academic view of how waterfall approach works, testing comes very late in the cycle, which can then prove difficult because if we find out the thing is wrong, we need to unpick everything. This doesn't mean that waterfall ways of working are bad. It just means that they're used appropriately in the correct environment, which is something we're going to look at now. So the first picture identifies a bottle of Coca-Cola. The second picture relates to the building of a Coca-Cola bottling plant. And the third picture is to identify new product innovation. What we're going to do is we're going to apply this now to Stacey's model. So this is the complexity and organizational reality model. If we look at this, the axis, so we've got requirements running down the left hand side. If it's down at this level, it means we're close to agreement over what the requirements are. And if we're up at the top of that axis, we're far from agreement on understanding what the requirements are. If we look at the horizontal axis, we've got technology. Think about technology or your environment. If we're close to certainty over what the environment is or what the technology is, it sits over here at the left hand side. If we're far from certainty about the technology or the environment, it sits on the right hand side. So let's go to the first domain, the simple domain. The simple domain is where everything is understood. This is where business as usual sits. So the bottling of Coca-Cola is something which is your business as usual. You fully understand the technology and the process for doing that work. So this is where business as usual would sit. So when you book a holiday within your organization, there is a process which is already in place, and we just follow that process. If we move out to the complicated domain, the complicated domain is where more is known than is unknown. This is where traditional project management sits quite well, because we are able to do big upfront design. So the Coca-Cola bottling plant, we can plan that up front, we can design it up front, we've done it before, and then we manage the risks associated with the work. The problem is, if we start to apply very traditional ways of working to the complex domain, where we need to be innovative, we need to be creative, we're now relying on people being able to express the requirements and the technology up front. So when we move to the complex domain, more is unknown than is known. This is where empirical process control, or the scientific methods of shortening feedback loops, failing fast. So this is the domain in which Agile works really well. So the simple domain is where everything is known. The complicated domain is where more is known than is unknown. And the complex domain is where Agile sits, because more is unknown than is known, and we will require a certain level of creativity and innovation to actually move the solution forward. We will need to evolve a solution. So waterfall or traditional ways of working are not good or evil, they're just a tool, and when used in the right place where people can clearly express what it is they want, working in that way is fine. It's just when we start to try and force the organisation to define exactly what it is once up front, that's where it doesn't work within that complex domain. So when we start to look at waterfall versus agile, one of the other things that businesses are trying to adopt as well is the early delivery of value. Because of the way waterfall is set up academically, we do all of the work, the requirements, analysis, design, coding, testing, and then we go operational, which is when we hand over a large solution to the business, and that's when the organisation starts to get value back. Whereas within an agile domain, what we do is we develop iteratively, so we go through iterative development cycles of build, measure and learn, okay, to work together to evolve the solution, and then we deliver the solution incrementally. We deliver blocks. So if you were looking at solving problems with, for example, clients, with customers, what you do is you look at where the value lies, where the customer is having the most problems, and then you solve those situations, and then you deliver solutions early. We don't build up all of the building blocks until the end and then deliver it at the end. So we always look at where the value lies and we try and deliver the value early. Okay? It may be a case if we were developing a product, we would be unable to deliver the product into the marketplace early, but we can deliver the product to stakeholders early so that we can elicit feedback from them, so we can evolve the solution based upon their feedback. Most people would understand Agile because in 2001, and this is where most people's understanding of where Agile was triggered comes from. In 2001, a group of thought leaders got together and they were being forced to try and deliver complex environments using very traditional ways of working. So this group of thought leaders went to the Snowbird Lodge in Utah, and in 2001 they came up with the Agile Manifesto and its 4 values and its 12 underpinning principles. Now these values and principles work just as well when we don't apply them to software development. So if we cross out the word software and we replace the word software with the word things or stuff, the manifesto for Agile stuff development works just as well. So the manifesto says we are uncovering better ways of developing things. By doing it and helping others do it, through this work we have come to value individuals and interactions over processes and tools, working things over comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, and responding to change over following a plan. That is, while there is value in the items on the right, we value the items on the left more. The values are there to put in place an overarching philosophy. So it should be about individuals and interactions. It doesn't mean we don't use processes and tools, but it should be about wherever possible, we co-locate, we collaborate, we communicate face to face. It doesn't mean the email is a bad thing to use as a tool, so we're not just going to destroy all of the tools we have. But wherever possible within the world of Agile, we try and get face to face, and it is about the individuals and their interactions. The next thing, working things over comprehensive documentation. This doesn't mean we're not going to have documentation. It just means that we look for, is the documentation valuable? And if it's not, then we might need to change it or not do it. But if it's regulatory or compliant, absolutely. But our focus should be on, are we delivering working things? If all of our phased gates are focused on us completing documents and then ticking off to say we've completed a document, then we're focused on the delivery of the wrong things. Customer collaboration over contract negotiation. Yes, we're still going to have contracts in place, but we need to change our focus on contracts to make sure that we're not trying to lock down time, cost, quality, and also the scope. Okay? Because we need to collaborate, because if we lock down everything early, it means that there's no ability to be able to innovate or the ability to be able to embrace change late in development. And as you'll see, on the last value, we respond to change over following a plan. This doesn't mean we don't have a plan. It just means our plans are more outcome based, and we accept change even late within development. We need plans for communication purposes, but those plans shouldn't stop us from changing. It shouldn't stop us from changing direction as we move through. So these are the values of the Agile Manifesto, which are applicable outside of the world of software development. If we look at the underpinning principles, okay, so our highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of valuable things. Again, remove the word software, because the Agile Manifesto and its principles work just as well outside of the world of software. We deliver working things frequently, from a couple of weeks to a couple of months, with a preference to the shorter time scale. So where possible, try and deliver in early so we can get the value. Working things should be the primary measure of progress, not the completion of documentation, the delivery of working things which we're able to demonstrate. This is one of my favourite principles, principle number 4. Agile processes promote sustainable development. The sponsors, developers and users should be able to maintain a constant pace indefinitely. Because if you've got your people working early, working late and working weekends, that pace is not sustainable. So Agile processes promote sustainable development. So we plan for our capacity based upon our velocity, the amount of work we've burnt through in the past. Right? Simplicity, the art of maximising the amount of work not done, is essential. Well, this just comes from lean environments of over processing. Okay, so keep it simple. Next principle, at regular intervals, the team reflects on how to become more effective, then tunes and adjusts its behaviour accordingly. These are our retrospectives, so we're always looking for continuous process improvement. Our next principle is to welcome changing requirements even late in development, because if we're going in the wrong direction, we need to change direction and we need to pivot mercilessly. Okay? Ignore what we've done up to that point. We don't just continue following a plan for the sake of following a plan. So agile processes harness change for the customer's competitive advantage. Sometimes this is what organisations will have problems with. Business people and the people developing must work together daily throughout the project. Okay? This doesn't mean that we have to all be co-located in the same space and you can't get on with your day-to-day work, but the people developing solutions must have access to business people who understand them, and where possible we will co-locate. Build projects around motivated individuals. Give them the environment and support they need and trust them to get the job done. So when you attend a training course, we will speak about emotional security. If you were to go onto a building site, somebody would give you a hard hat, they would give you, toe tactors, they would give you sort of like a high visibility jacket. When we ask people to be creative and innovative, we don't protect their psychological safety. We protect employees' physical safety, but we don't protect their psychological safety. So if you go to somebody and you say, be creative, be innovative, fail fast, we need to give them an environment that they trust, that it's acceptable to fail fast. It's acceptable that if we're being creative, that we might go in the wrong direction. Continuous attention to technical excellence and good design enhances agility is our next principle. So it does. So we build quality into everything we do. We never bolt it on. And if we need to document those levels of quality, they're documented as part of the work. So the best architectures, requirements and designs emerge from self-organizing teams. And you'll talk about this a lot on the course as well. That what we need to do is we need to provide the teams with a certain level of autonomy. They have control over when they do the work, how they do the work and who they do the work with. The teams self-organize. They're not directed. Nobody hands them the work. They pull the work in. And then the final one we've always known to be true. The most efficient and effective method of conveying information to and within a development team is face-to-face conversation. And that is the utopian view, is a co-located team sharing the same space and communicating face-to-face. If we can't do this, then what we should do is we should put in place technology like Skype or WebEx, these types of things, so the teams can communicate face-to-face. If we can't, then our next port of call should be the telephone. If we can't use the telephone, then use messaging software. Email is very good for confirming information or sending people information that we're going to look at together. But as a communication tool, it relies on the person writing the email to be able to write it in a way which is easily interpreted, and the person receiving it being able to interpret it in the way it was written. Okay, so what you should understand about Agile is that Agile is values and principles based around the Agile Manifesto. And when you come on a training course, we will also talk about the values of Scrum as well. So what's important within the world of Agile are the values. So if you look at the Agile Manifesto, there are 4 values and it's principles. And you can see that it's underpinned by 12 principles. The values and principles are there to put in place the philosophy and mindset within which we work. This is something we live and breathe on a day-to-day basis, and those things are much more important than the practices and rules. So when you think of Agile, don't think of all of the frameworks. Think about it as a way of thinking. So, to finish off, what are the benefits of using Agile? Well, there are lots of benefits. There are risks, and we will discuss risks associated with it when you attend a training course. But the benefits of working in an Agile way is that it's iterative and it's adaptable, so we can respond to changes. We get rapid and early value creation, so by putting out potentially releasable increments every few weeks or sooner, we can start to get value back. Feedback is maximized because, again, if we look about Agile frameworks, they're very focused on providing feedback on the product during reviews, and we'll look at something called Scrum on your training, and retrospectives around the process. We focus on what's valuable, the priorities, so we reduce waste by doing the most valuable work. So not everything is prioritized in the same way. And we'll talk about a technique called Moscow prioritization. So that stands for must have, should have, could have, and won't have at this time. A must have requirement is something that if I was to come to you 5 minutes before we go live and say you couldn't have it, you would rather cancel. A should have is difficult to live without, but we could get around it. And a could have is one of those things that we go, it would be nice to have, but we probably wouldn't notice it if it wasn't there. Won't haves are the things that we've already removed. So we focus on delivering those must haves, those higher value priorities to increase the value. We're quality driven. So we only release things when it meets with the definition of done, and with an agile, quality is built into everything we do. It's never bolted on. Everything must meet with the definition of done. We only plan to sensible horizons. So we still have high level plans. We all have a vision of the end state. We will have a roadmap in place so everybody can see what we're heading towards. But we then only plan the detail of the next sprint. So that planning horizon is never any more than 4 weeks. Okay, typically 2 to 4 weeks. Other benefits of working in an agile way is that we start to get collaborative and teamwork championed. So individuals are supported by their colleagues, the business is involved in the development conversation, whatever solution we're developing, and the work is prioritized to respond to customer needs. The teams then self-organize, so team motivation increases because they start to see it as them owning the work. We form cross-functional teams, so we start to break down the silos, so we start to learn more. The work is transparent, and that's how we demonstrate control, so the work is visible and people can see what we're working on. So customers and stakeholders start to increase confidence, and then we create a learning organization because we transfer our learning throughout the organization. Okay. Now we will go into these concepts, but as a minimum, this is what we would expect you to understand before attending the 2-day training course. So feel free to go back through this presentation. It shouldn't take you any more than half an hour to go through, and you can go back over the presentation as many times as you like, because on day 1 of your training course, when we start, we expect you to understand this pre-course work.